The story takes place in 2004. 2 months prior to this, I had been experiencing frequent chest tightness. I was worried and confided in my ex-husband about the situation, hoping that he would be concerned. However, he was not willing to listen to my nagging and did not seem to care at all about my problem. I felt very helpless, but I did not stop seeking help. Every day, I kept praying to God for relief and comfort. I poured out my pain and confusion to God, placing my hope and trust. One day, my ex-husband and I had a heated argument. He had been ranting loudly at me. I watched his mouth open and close, but I couldn't hear what he was saying. It was as if I had gone into another dimension. In that moment, I felt very desperate and alone. In this desperate situation, I began to pray, God, please take me. I don't want to go on living anymore. This was my true feeling at that time. I felt that life had lost its meaning, and I felt that I could no longer endure such pain and suffering. I was lying on the couch and felt my heart beating irregularly. With each heartbeat, I felt short of breath. This situation made me very uncomfortable, and I told my ex-husband about my distress, hoping that he could give me some help and support. However, his answer disappointed me. I have to admit that in my normal life, I am a more serious person and sensitive to things. This may have led me to show more overreaction when facing difficulties. Suddenly, my soul passed through my head like a bullet. As my soul left my body, I could see myself lying on the couch. My ex-husband was on his knees, pleading with God not to let me go. In this moment, I felt a sense of relief that I no longer needed to breathe. I was free in the true sense of the word. Suddenly, the ceiling of the room disappeared and transformed into a sea of white clouds. These clouds began to rotate slowly, forming a huge tunnel. Without the slightest hesitation, I walked into that tunnel. The clouds in the tunnel rapidly rotated around me, and I felt a state of immense lightness. The end of the tunnel continued to expand, emitting a soft glow. The pain and distress of the past was dissipating. Time loses its concept here. I don't know where I am headed, but I am filled with wonder and anticipation. I move quickly through the tunnel. Just as I was about to reach the spot where the light was, there was a sudden thud, and I felt myself falling into another dimension. I looked up and saw 3 angels appear in the upper right. The first angel had silver white wings, like pure snowflakes. His eyes sparkled with wisdom. His face was very soft and gave off a warm feeling. He wore a white robe. The second angel had golden wings that shone like sunlight. His eyes showed determination and courage. His face gave off a feeling of power and fearlessness. He was clad in shining golden armor, as if he were a fighting angel. The third angel possessed pink wings. Her eyes radiated infinite forgiveness and love. She wore a colorful coat. She seemed to be an angel of love, conveying unconditional love and warmth. Each angel exuded a special energy and meaning. I asked myself in my mind, what is going on here? What am I in for? Suddenly, all my doubts were answered. I realized that this was my real home, and this was my 3rd time back in heaven. I remembered my 2 previous returns to heaven, and before that it was because of suicide. The angels told me that if I chose such a path again, I would remain in hell forever. The angels continued to give me comfort. They told me in soft words that I belonged here, but that now was not the time. I had to move on. I was not willing to leave, and I realized I had no choice. Suddenly, I was once again in another dimension. This place was so humid and dark that I could not see my surroundings. The place was filled with an atmosphere of sadness, and no hope seemed to exist. I felt frustrated and desperate and realized that if I chose to commit suicide, I would be trapped in this darkness forever. I couldn't do anything in this place. I felt bound by invisible forces. I fell to my knees and prayed to God. I bowed my head and said, "God, please let me leave this place." I wanted to be relieved and get out of this desperate and dark situation. I hoped that God would hear my call and give me guidance and salvation. However, the voice of my prayers seemed to be swallowed up and went unanswered. The surroundings became more and more terrifying, and darkness enveloped everything. Terrifying shadows roamed around. The scenery around me became distorted, as if I had entered a twisted nightmare. I tried to find a ray of hope, only to find myself plunged deeper into the darkness. Suddenly, a warm energy appeared around my body. A person appeared in front of me. I was still on my knees, so I could only see a pair of feet. There were obvious scars on the feet. I didn't dare to raise my head and look directly at this person. At this time, he stretched out a hand and I slowly raised my head. Just as I expected, he was Jesus. His gaze revealed wisdom and endless compassion. His skin radiated a dazzling light. His hair and beard looked very soft, as if they were woven from pure light. Through his gaze, I felt completely accepted. Jesus wore a long white robe, and he also had visible scars on his hands. In Jesus' presence, I felt an inner peace. He gently lifted me up and led me out of that dark and desperate place. I was once again back in the arms of heaven. I had never seen such a magnificent sight. I looked up into the sky as a flock of white doves flew over my head. The air here was fresh and pure, and the flowers gave off an enchanting fragrance. Everything is full of beauty and blessings. Suddenly, I felt myself losing control. I started to back up and then return to my body. Once again, I felt the bondage of my physical body and the pull of gravity. Soon, my soul began to detach from my body again. This happened 3 times, and each time I traveled through the tunnel and into another realm. When I returned to my body for the last time, I saw a bright blue sky. The clouds in the sky were soft and fluffy, like cotton candy. It was at this time that I heard my ex-husband's voice, and I was back in my body. "I have called the emergency services," he said anxiously. I replied, "No need, I feel fine. Can you get me a glass of water? I am very thirsty." That afternoon, I went to a church closest to my home. As I entered the church, I shed tears. I told the other church members what I had been through. The church members gathered. I described my experience of traveling through the tunnel and my encounter with Jesus. I shared the confusion and despair in my soul and the feeling of finding relief and peace in heaven. They embraced me, conveying love and care. This warm atmosphere comforted me. After a few hours, I left the church and returned home with inner peace and gratitude. I had prayed for Jesus to let me stay in heaven. I understood that this request was impossible to fulfill. I understood that I had to return to the real world. This experience made me realize that I have a responsibility to continue living in this world. I understood the preciousness of life and my responsibility to my loved ones. Even though Jesus did not ask me to stay, I thank him for the precious opportunity. I understand that I have to cherish life and continue to search for my own meaning and purpose. This experience made me believe in God's will even more. I accepted the fate of returning to the real world, and that I still have important tasks in this world. This experience has made me realize that every day is a miracle and every moment is worth cherishing. I hope to live a meaningful life with gratitude.